of distributed computing, it's that building distributed systems is very hard, which makes you wonder why so many people rush into building a microservices system. Here's a very nice quote from Simon Brown that I wanted to share with you, and he says that you should choose microservices for the benefits, and not because your monolithic code base is a mess. In other words, it's not at all uncommon for developers to try to use microservices to solve some problems they have inside of their monolith systems without realizing that they are actually using the wrong tool for the job. Now, I wasn't saying all of this to deter you from using microservices. In fact, microservices have many benefits, and here are just a few good reasons to build microservices. So first of all, you get scalability. You also get data isolation, which could be very important in some industries. You get organizational autonomy, which makes it easier for you to distribute work across your teams. You also get independent deployability, which means you can deploy each microservice on its own without having to redeploy the other microservices in the system. Another benefit is the ability to have zero downtime deployments, and you can also use microservices to improve the fault tolerance of your system by isolating some components that are less reliable. And while microservices have seen a very big surge in popularity in recent years, we are also seeing a lot of proponents for the monolith-first approach. Here is a quote from Martin Fowler that nicely encompasses this, and he says that you shouldn't start a new project with microservices even if you're sure that your application will be big enough to make it worthwhile. And there are a few reasons why he said this, so let's try to unpack what these reasons are. From experience, most successful microservices implementations started out as monolith applications. The monolith grew and grew over time and became more difficult to maintain and evolve without introducing unintended side effects, which is why the decision was made to break up the monolith into microservices. The reason that it's better to break up a monolith system into a microservices rather than starting with microservices from the start is because it's easier to determine what are the boundaries of your system. These boundaries should directly translate to the microservice boundaries, and it's really difficult to get the boundaries right when you're starting with microservices from scratch. And this is the biggest pain point when developers are trying to develop microservices first. The problem is that the service boundaries are very difficult to get right. Moreover, the service boundaries are also more difficult to refactor due to the fact that you are now working in a distributed system. So my recommendation is that it's often better to start with a modular monolith, evolve the system over time, and only extract the modules into separate services when you need some of the other qualities that microservices have to offer, such as independent deployability, improved scalability, zero downtime deployments, and so on. I did some research into what big companies use monolithic architecture to build their system, and one of the first examples is Stack Overflow, but also Twitch, the streaming platform, Airbnb for apartments booking, and Shopify for online sales. And in fact, some of these companies like Stack Overflow and Shopify are still running a monolith system. Shopify has been undergoing a transition to the modular monolith architecture for the past few years, and they have documented this process very well on their blog. So this should be sufficient proof that we can build very large and successful applications using a monolithic architecture. Now, what are some of the other benefits that monoliths have to offer? This won't be an exhaustive list, but I wanted to highlight the simplified deployment compared to a microservices system because you are only deploying a single application. You also get easier transaction management inside of a monolith because you don't have to work with multiple databases. The complexity of a monolith system is typically lower than that of the same system implemented using microservices, and this is because you have fewer moving parts interacting with each other. It should be obvious by now that both monoliths and microservices have many advantages, and wouldn't it be great if we could combine the best of both worlds? So let's say we take the physical architecture of a monolith, the immediate consistency, a single deployment unit, a simplified deployment cycle, and overall reduced complexity, and we combine that with the logical architecture of a microservices system where we have independent, isolated components that interact with each other to form the complete system. The answer to this question is a resounding yes, and this architecture is called a modular monolith. It's also going to be the main topic of our discussion in the next lessons and chapters in this course. And this brings us to the next lesson in this chapter called modular monoliths.